Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to History of Horror Cinema, my personal podcast tour of the good, bad, and the ugly of horror movie history. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe. Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, 1955. The last of Bud and Lou's riotous collisions with Universal's vault of horror icons was in Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy in 1955. This seems to have been long overdue in that detours were made after tangling with the big three of Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Wolfman, by way of half-hearted tangling with Boris Karloff, a belated crossing of paths with the Invisible Man, and then falling foul of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, before seemingly realizing they still had one more of the studio's Hall of Fame to encounter. Admittedly, The Mummy as a franchise had dragged its weary soul through enough diminishing quality sequels to understandably seal its own sarcophagus from the inside. However, one last bid was made to create laughs in the midst of fear around Lou's panicky coward persona and Bud's overbearing know-it-all. As we saw in Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, there were definite signs of weariness in the duo after almost 2 decades together and 36 films. This was to be their penultimate one together before finally calling it a day with Dance With Me Henry the next year. Lou was still dogged by recurring rheumatic fever, which caused him to noticeably lose weight, and Bud now looked heavier than he. Meet the Mummy appears to be the only one of their films where John Grant received sole screenplay credit after all his years of service. Sadly, it is a poor showcase for him. Bud and Lou, under their stage names, are 2 pith-helmeted numbskull explorers seeking their fortune in Cairo, who get wind of the need for a couple of guys to chaperone the body of Clarice, a mummy who in life guarded the tomb of Princess Ara. His corpse bears a sacred medallion, said to point to the location of her fabled treasure. Inevitably, the boys become a target for a cult led by a dark, satanic femme fatale. Aren't they all when it comes to our heroes? Madame Rontru, played bewitchingly by Marie Windsor. In real life, she was a protégée of Maria Uspenskaya, famous for her gypsy Maleva in the Wolfman movies. Perhaps a little of the Polish Grand Dame's occult flavor was handed down to her almond-eyed student, a character ruthlessly pursuing the medallion for her own gain. The sinister group will stop at nothing, firstly killing Clarice's finder, Dr. Gustav Zuma, Kurt Katch. There is a smile-worthy moment when Lou listens to a tape Zuma made before his death in which he decrees that deaths await the acquisitive. "Oh," Lou tails off mournfully in response. Bud and Lou soon realize the deadly import of the trinket after they have the bright idea of trying to sell it in the marketplace to find out its true value. "It's death to whoever finds it!" shrieks one trader. On hearing this, the dunderhead duo feud between themselves in a restaurant set-piece in which they repeatedly conceal it in each other's hamburgers, until Lou eats it with the kind of lingering-to-camera, resigned reactions reminiscent of Oliver Hardy. Madame Rontru's single-mindedness is so extreme that when seduction fails, she forces Lou to undertake an X-ray so she can prove the medallion is inside him and then forcibly remove it, to expectedly fatal results. An amusingly surreal gag is the crew's shaking up of him that results in the dislodged parts forming help on the next scan. The evil lady boss teams up with the balding, sinister Semu, Richard Deacon, who she will blithely double-cross on her way to the treasure. Genre fans may recognize Deacon from the original 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers and The Birds, but here he subtracts any luster from his scenes by delivering his lines as though embalmed like his quarry. Also along for the wicked ride is Michael Ansara, in one of the early roles that made use of his Syrian coloring to simulate different ethnicities, sometimes playing First Nation parts in westerns. Later, he would find sci-fi fantasy stature as Klingon Commander Kang across the Star Trek TV franchises, Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. With banal villain lines like Semu's "2 more mice come to nibble at the golden cheese," we can be grateful that the last act at least has some enlivenment and 1 or 2 chills in store within the tomb itself, that Lou accidentally stumbles into via a secret passage. The set design, with its central sarcophagus and wall hieroglyphics, is impressively spacious, if uncannily clean and Spartan like a modern ballroom. Lou is terrorized by a flying bat, a mischievous skeleton, and a giant process-shot lizard. Eddie Parker, an in-demand stuntman who doubled for Lon Chaney in his earlier Mummy sequels, embodies Clarice and adds more substance to the threat level after he is awakened from slumber. On the rampage, he's fairly convincing, which is more than can be said for his bandaging, which is evidently a one-piece suit instead of bound wrapping. Following a lame three-way farce setup involving a trio of mummies, Clarice, one of the henchmen, and Bud, Parker may well raise a goosebump or two in the faint of heart as he goes after the treacherous Rontru. Bullets are no match for him. Ultimately, it takes a sizable wedge of dynamite to blow him up in a death more excitingly rendered than some of the genuine horror endings of the original film series. Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy is a weak ending to their experiments in horror-comedy hybrids. All too often, the movies were cut-and-shut vehicles fused together from disparate elements without due care for roadworthiness. Only Meet the Invisible Man found an artful way to mix genres. There is a sense as well with this last one of the boys' ongoing struggle with the watering down of their plots. They had often complained about the preponderance of song and dance interruptions insisted upon by Universal. Meet the Mummy shoehorns in a song by Peggy King and no less than 3 sneaked-in choreographed dance numbers. Despite tax problems that later bedeviled them, Abbott and Costello could look back on a monumental run of over 20 years together that conquered every medium they worked in, from theater to radio, film to television, and at one point made them the most popular and highest-paid entertainers in the world. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe.